cattle, grassland, soil have all evolved together because of the way that they function, and also with the microbiology of the cow. You know, this it's super complex. You know, they feed 70% of what they feed off is created from microbiology in their gut. They're not eating off the grass, they're eating off the grass is feeding the microbiology in their gut, and they're feeding off what that produces. It's super complex. So then when they shed, there's so much microbiology in that then just feeds back into the soil, because they were all created at the same time. They all stem from the same thing. Grassland without cattle is called a desert. It's true. Yeah, it's fascinating. It gets me very excited. Have a look. That is a pile of shit. Right?
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a pile of shit. Look at all that. There's little bugs in it. There's a slug there. Some fungal networking developing.
So that's the impact of the manure on improving pasture health.
Exactly. Look at that.
You see a lot of carbon there too, eh?
That's root hairs. That's
That's root hairs.
yeah. That's fungi. This is cow shit.
It's pretty much almost gone, really. It's been eaten up.
And look at the quality of the grass around it. That's the importance of animals, basically. Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's
sure.
all. That's root hairs with fungal networks around them, and that's what they talk about with the mycorrhizal networking.
So this is like one of the key ideas of regenerative grazing, how grazing animals can restore their health back into a landscape and
Totally.
sequester carbon.
So how do the exudates sequester the carbon maybe more effectively than just the digging in and the composting?
Because compost is decomposition, so it's breaking down, so you'll get carbon dioxide from composition, and it's a lot less because it's only in that top layer. It's more volatile, so if it dries out, if there's a drought, someone goes in and chews it out, then it will dry out, and then that will die, and then it will eventually break down.
Right. And
Whereas the idea is to get it as deep into the soil profile as possible. So if you're kind of wanting to get down to here,
it's more stable there.
it's far more stable, and if you can get it into the clay base, which is what this is, so you imagine this has kind of got a layer of topsoil that we're building, probably about yay deep. It's clay.
Is it?
Yeah, that's why in the winter this gets really heavily pugged, because we can see there. So you can see there, see that line of topsoil?
Oh yeah.
And then clay.
And that lighter layer is clay.
Yeah. So what you're trying to do is build that topsoil up, but you're also trying to infiltrate into that clay base. So, and that's where all the minerals are tied up in the clay.
Yeah.
And that's yeah. So if you can get plants that will go further down into that clay base by having longer rooted plants, because if you imagine what you see above ground is what's generally below ground. So that's what we're trying to do.
Do the microorganisms play a role in that too? Like how the exudates feed them, and
totally.
in exchange they help mine those deeper nutrients and supply them to the plants?
Yeah.
And do the micro...
So they will go, so you'll see, it's really fascinating. They develop what's called a rhizosheath. Do you know about rhizosheaths? So around the root zone, the rhizosphere, is basically the interaction. So what they call raster roots, celery. So what that is all that soil is held, is on the roots. So basically if you dug the plant up, all that soil sticks to the roots.
Yes.
And that's the development of that network between the root here and the soil microbiology. And they've formed these things called rhizosheaths, which are basically where the zone where that interaction takes place. So as the root here goes down into like a clay base like that, it will have the microbiology will be surrounding that root. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. I'll show you.
So the exudates, they sequester the carbon in terms of like just that liquid that you're talking about.
Well, they're feeding, so they're not necessarily the final stage.
They're not.
It's the microbiology that's eating that carbon and then dying.
And then dying that stabilizes it. Okay.
Yeah. And that's rhizome sheets.
And you can see they're quite sticky, sticking to the roots.
It's a whole environment that's been produced. And if you go into a conventional wheat field and dig up a wheat plant, its roots will be clean, especially if it's had nitrogen, artificial nitrogen.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's a big difference.
Yeah. So when you pull out, so if you've got clean roots,
that's not a good
your
sign.
biology's not functioning at all, and the plants. Because what happens when you put soluble fertilizers on is the plant doesn't need that network, so you're basically cutting that network off. It doesn't need it, so it doesn't try. So what you need to allow the plant to develop that network, and that's why it's hard to go from a conventional to a regenerative without. You can't just go cold turkey. You have to wean it off because the plant still needs that.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't developed that network.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can take like 3 to 6 months to develop that network anyway. So you imagine an annual plant that's being ploughed every 12 months, takes them 3 months to develop the network, and then it gets ploughed up again.
So a big part of the exudates that the plants produce not only carbon sequestration but building up that microorganism community in the soil that will support it.
Well, that's the ultimate goal. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And that is, it's the death of that microbiology that creates soil. Yeah, and that's what it is.
And it creates the carbon.
And also, but it's also the humus that holds those soil particles together. The glue, that's really important. That's about 60% carbon. So that's the black shit, the brown, dark brown. Yeah. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting how microorganisms glue together soil aggregates and helps bind up the nutrients in those aggregates for slow release back into the soil, and they can really kind of change the whole properties of the soil, can't they?
Yep, and you can take, and that's why soil tests don't really work, because all they do is check for soluble nutrients. And even, because they're checking what's available, but it's not necessarily available yet, because the microbiology make it available. And also there's enzymes in the exudates that actually help break it down as well. It's fucking nature, you know, it knows what it's doing. It's done it for a long time. We've just gone in and thought, oh yeah, it's simple, throw a bit of nitrogen on, a bit of phosphate on, it grows. It's very, reductionist science. It's so complex, and that's why it's hard to study, and that's why it's hard to get research from, because it's super complex.
And you're getting more of the trace micronutrients, I'd imagine, too, in that natural system, as opposed to dumping in lots of NPK.
Yeah, totally. And then you get like secondary metabolites that are designed. They're not nutrients. The plant can function without them.
Yeah.
But they're things that help with immunity from disease, signalling to other plants. So these plants will network. They will signal to the other plants through the mycorrhizal networks. So if there's a plant that's getting attacked by something, it will signal to the rest of the plant and put out a defense mechanism to stop that attack.
It's amazing, eh?
Yeah, it's crazy. Trees do it. So it's fascinating. Just we think we know it all, but we don't. Okay. So this is the same land, but that's been managed differently for maybe 10 years.
Look at it, you can see it, eh? And look how much it's grazed down.
Yeah.
So this is more conventional grazing system here? Okay.
Yeah. So the microbiology is kind of dead, because the cow patch is still here. It's like what's the difference? This is the difference between regenerative farming.
So this is regenerative farming
And look at the erosion.
as opposed to conventional.
Quite steep here, though. But that's like a gouge, isn't it?
And this probably shouldn't be farmed.
Except for the animals even venture out there, it looks scary. Oh.
Like, actually there's probably an inch or two more soil on this side of the fence than there is on that. So they're losing soil, we're building soil.
Oh right, it's gonna graze. Jesus, look at it.
But this is where the soil level is here.
Yeah, and it's much
It's
lower.
about 2 inches lower on that
That's
side. So they've
incredible.
probably lost an inch, we've probably gained an inch.
Yeah.
In about, I don't know how
Wow.
long he's been leasing it, probably 8 years.
And even around this cow pat, there's none of that kind of activity of plant growth and decomposition we saw in that earlier example.
It'd be interesting to get a spade around here, eh, and look underneath.
A little bit too far. But this is to me is perfect cattle fodder.
What are you going for in the residual?
Well, the idea is to eat half the plant.
Yep.
And no more than half the plant,
Okay.
basically. And for them to trample it, so there's litter on the ground for the microbiology to consume as well. And so the plant's not stressed out, so it doesn't go to seed too quickly.
And how does that tie in with carbon sequestration?
Well, okay, so if you imagine that each of these here is a little solar panel.
Yep.
Okay, so what you're doing is that is photosynthesizing. So it's magical. It's taking breathing in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then it's converting it into sugars in its leaves. And it's what's it called?
Chlorophyll.
Yeah, but there's a chloroplast, and it converts it into sugars and feeds that into the soil. So it uses, some plants will push up to 40% of that carbon into the soil to feed soil microbiology. So the great thing about plants, and why grassland is so much more effective than trees, is that plants have such a huge root mass. So they can have like twice the biomass underground as they do above ground. And that's where they store the carbon. There's so much locked up in it.
And what kind of exudates do the grasses put into the soil?
Well, it's very complex. So it's sugars, proteins, just loads. I mean, it's super complex. And it's just basically all the good things that microbiology, bacteria, fungi live off. And then they have this beautiful symbiotic relationship where they exchange minerals for that energy. It's basically the energy that feeds the soil comes from the grass.
And when you've got quite a long, lush pasture like this that's quite diverse, how does that impact upon the exudates that go into the ground?
Well, I took a bricks test the other day and it was 15, which is almost unheard of. And that is absolutely pumping. It was a sunny day.
Because you said the range is like 3 to maybe 8 or something like that?
Well, grassland, New Zealand rowgrass, it's about 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
And what does the bricks test tell you?
It tells you the soluble sugars, amongst other things, but mostly the soluble sugars in the plant.
Okay. And that gives you an indication of the level of exudates too?
Yeah. It gives you, what it shows is the functioning of photosynthesis. So the higher the bricks is the better functioning of photosynthesis.
Okay.
Yeah. But it can be, you can get a false reading if you've got high nitrate plants.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful. So if you're in a high nitrate dairy situation, then you can get false readings. Because the nitrates are also sort of like, the nitrates will show up as soluble items basically, like soluble sugars. So it's just basically showing you what's in the plant. So the bricks test is like a refractometer. So it's all about light passing through it, and that's how you get the reading.
Does the bricks test vary between the different plants? Have you compared, say, the plantain to others?
Yeah. So you'll get a higher reading from things like clover and chicory. Yeah. And you can see, and also like the cattle will go feed on high energy stuff because obviously it's sweeter, tastes better, and it's better energy for them. But the idea of this sort of mob stocking, like what I was doing yesterday, is that they're non-selective, or a lot less selective, because they've got the mob pressure. So they are competitive with each other because there's a lot of pressure on them. So they're not thinking about what they're eating so much, they just go in and eat. Whereas when it's a set stocking situation where they can pick and choose, they go, oh, this is nice, I want to eat this, oh, this is nice, and they'll pick out all the best bits of your paddocks. Whereas one of the ideas behind this sort of mob stocking intensity is that it creates that competition, so they're just like, right, we've just got to eat. And that's where you get more level grazing.
Right, yeah, that's quite level.
Does that mean the pasture diversity is maintained too? They're not
totally
stripping
and you
out
don't
certain
get, so the
species?
problem here, you can see like the fescue's gone to seed a bit because it hasn't been grazed hard enough in the past, and then it's very difficult to get the cattle to eat that because it's a lot, like it almost goes like cutty grass, the fescue. and that's when it gets all bunchy, and you'll see it down
it
the
gets
way.
older.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because and that's the thing with this whole holistic grazing thing. It's not about letting the grass go to seed. It's not long grass grazing. It's just wrong. It's about understanding that you only graze half the plant, and you've still got to hit it. You've still got to graze it out like that. Yeah, you know, still really hard, but you only really want to take half the plant away.
So what stage of growth is optimal for the growth of the grasses and other plants to graze it?
To graze it just before it sets seed, so just before it flowers.
Okay.
So it's still got quite a high leaf to stem ratio.
Yeah.
It's about the 5 leaf stage.
Yeah.
But it's when you've got pasture diversity, it's hard. It's not hard to manage. But I always look at the colour of the grass because you can almost see. Like you can see when it stops, when it kind of stops growing, it darkens up. So you can see like that over there has been grazed like a couple of days ago, and you can see the bright because it's growing. So it's pumping loads of nitrogen.
So why is grazing just before it goes to seed a good idea?
Because as soon as it starts to flower, it's putting all its energy into the flower. So basically, all that energy is going into producing seed and reproducing. So the plants, all the nutrients and everything are going to go into that seed because that's how it reproduces. So that's what it needs. So you're losing that. But if the animals are eating that, that's not a problem. But they tend not to.
So while it's vigorously growing, it's producing a lot of exudates, but that changes as it starts to go to seed and starts to put energy
and then
into
it
seed
puts
production.
energy in. Yep.
And then what kind of process happens when it's been grazed? What does that help build the soil too once you've grazed it?
Yes, there's research now that suggests that there's, I was reading about the other day, there's growth promotants in the cow's saliva. So there's certain growth regulators, and what that does is it encourages tillering, so more plants. So see how it's patched like this? What that grazing will do is we'll get the grass plants to send up more tillers, and which will close up these, and so that keeps the momentum for a perennial system going. And then in their saliva they've also got sodium salts and potassium salts, which and potassium is like a really great nutrient for plants, for grass. So feast, so these guys here, they'll feast, fill themselves up, and then they just sit down and they'll just ruminate, get their bellies going. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. Because these are all down the flats here. These are all peat flats, so they're they're probably about this thick, and then they've got water underneath the water table. So this controls the water to keep the peat damp, because if it dries out, it dies basically.
Oh wow!
So the lake is designed. So there's channels that come out of the lake. So that we hold the water back. Absolutely fucking pissed down. So we'll come down here and we'll lift this gate up and let the water go. There's a little mark on the gate that shows us where the level should be. So this holds the water table at just the right height to keep those flats. And that's in summer what keeps us going, because we've got that control. So it's an irrigation system, but it requires no energy apart from pulling that up. And if you see, look at the water coming out. So that's runoff from the farm, effectively. The colour of it is because of the peat. So it loses some nutrients from the peat, but that's just, you can't do anything about that. In a big rain event, that water is still that colour. That's insane. Whereas, and that's because our soil is so good. That's what I'm saying about the water, it's clear because we're not losing any sediment because it's the humus that holds, it's the glue that holds the soil together.
Okay.
And that's sort of stability. And one of the biggest issues in New Zealand is soil erosion in New Zealand. So this holds the water about this far away below the surface of the peat.
So you're holding up the water table?
So we're holding the water table up,
okay.
and it keeps the moisture. And the peat flats really clever.
Yeah. So how does it work?
It's like the hydrant, the pressure. It's got spring.
Spring feed, yeah.
Well, no, it's got spring action in it.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And so you just push it in and twist it.
So is this that you've plugged it into it, does your main line have lots of branches coming off it, like this one that you've plugged into?
Yeah, so that's keyed into that line there.
Okay, so the main line runs along the length of the main paddock?
About 4 lines that go out across the farm.
Okay, yep.
And then, you run these tees off, run these pipes off, so then you've got, you could split this up into 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's another hydrant over there. Yeah, so these are the R2s. So these are what we're producing basically. There's 130 in here. So see that one there? That dumpy, solid thing that's kind of in the middle there? That there is like fat, should be fit to kill. Okay, unfortunately that's a really horrible thing to say, but see how she's just looking at us? See how she's got a really heavy brisket? She's nice and round and covered. That's what you call a finished animal. Something like that, but some farmers would say that's over 480 kilos.
And do you send them away?
Yeah, so they'll be going either today or tomorrow.
Okay.
We'll send 7 or 8 every 2 weeks, all year round. Yeah.
And that's where you're getting 100 kilos a week from the other day you were
Well, that's the growth. So at the moment, so if you work out, okay, we've got 350 head of cattle on the farm.
Yeah.
These girls here will probably be growing at least a kilo a day. The smaller ones will be growing about 0.75 of a kilo a day. But then over 350, you only get a third of the animal comes back as actual meat.
Right.
But actual real meat that you can eat, we're producing about 100 kilos a day, which is a lot. And if you should only really be eating about 100 grams a day, if that's a lot of people.
For how many? For 100?
That's 1,000 people a day.